Okay, so yesterday we were discussing about what is the optimal decision boundary, and in that we have just discussed, and all things are recorded and they are there in the uploaded videos for YouTube, right? So you can go and check the previous stuff. So today I am going to start and discuss like what is the expected loss. So we found out when we were finding out the optimal decision boundary. So we said that it is always good to just give a decision in favor of the higher probability class, right? So if there are two classes, right? Say so if there are two classes and you want to say like if you just found out a decision boundary and you are here saying that this is for class 1 region and this is for class 2 region. So we come up this optimal decision boundary because this is optimal decision boundary because here every time we found out that the probability of C1 is greater than C2, right? Till they cross each other. So till this line, I am finding out C1 is greater than C2. So that's why I say that every time X belongs to this region, you just say directly that it belongs to C1 because C1 is having a higher probability here. But now the rule is same. Now C2 is bigger than C1 in this region. So if X fall in this region, then directly you say that it belongs to C2 because C2 is a higher probability. So we have just discussed and we found out that this is how we get at an optimal decision boundary. Because why it was optimal decision boundary? Because can anybody tell me why it was optimal decision boundary? So
The
the
sum of
area,
probabilities.
yeah, sum of so the area under the curve for error is minimum in this case only. For an example, if you take this decision boundary, the area for error will be this. The area for error will be this one, right? And this area is this one. And if you shift this boundary to here, it will give this area, right? And if you just slide further, then this area will add to the part, right? So the optimal decision boundary is only when you can minimize your error at the maximum, right? So when the error is minimum, right? So this is only case when out of these two things, out in this probability distribution, you will get only minimum error when you will get this decision boundary. So we have discussed this and we have understood that as well. Now, it is not always that optimal decision boundary will come with this flavor only. For an example, you may have a different goal, and then that goal will define your the different optimality conditions. So this is to understand it. For an example, let's say we are in some hospital, and that hospital do some test over a patient, and let's say the problem and that the test is for cancer. So if normal person goes to the hospital and he found out that if normal person goes to a hospital, it means he's not suffering from any cancer tissues. So then the test comes result, the true test is positive, test is true. So if he's normal, the test says also normal, then there is no cost involved in it. It means we are happy, right? But if normal person goes and test says that he's suffering from cancer, then we say that it is not good. So we are putting some cost over it. So we are penalizing it. We are penalizing it. So normal person goes to hospital, he do some test, and we found out that he is suffering from this cancer. So if he's suffering from cancer, so we take it like as a penalty situation, but not very. It is not very worst situation because if person goes to a hospital, he found out that he is suffering from cancer, he may get depressed. He may not be, and in that depression, he just stay for some while and he go to some other hospital and he do some test for further procedure. Then he found out that actually he is a normal, so he has a recovery point, right, somewhere in the future. So that's why we put a penalty, but not so harsh penalty. But if a cancer patient goes to a hospital and he found out, then the test says that he's suffering from cancer. So actually that case is true. So we are again not putting any penalty because the person is having a cancer and test also says it's a cancer. But if a cancerous person goes to a hospital and the test says he's normal, right? This is a very dangerous situation. Because if he's a person suffering from cancer and he goes to the hospital, test says he's normal, he come back, he's happy, he's now doing his routine activities, and things get worse and worse day by day. And later at the stage when he's at the last stage, he will get to know that he is a cancer and there is no recovery point at that time. So we don't want this situation. So it is okay to accept that normal person is declared as a cancer, but it is not at all acceptable that a cancer person is declared as a normal. So we are putting some penalties here, but and these penalties are not uniform. So you see that we are putting a very high penalty in the case when person is having a cancer and we say it is normal. If that is the case, then my decision boundary, then the definition of optimal decision boundary will get changed, right? Because now if the cost were uniform, it means it was like this 1 1. So which decision boundary will be okay for this optimal decision boundary? This is 1 and this is 2, let's say, right? So if my penalty matrix is this, right, cost matrix is this, what do you think, which decision boundary is okay for it, 1 or 2? I am penalizing equally to both cases. So what do you think?
One.
Which one?
One.
Right? One is the case. And if I want not to accept any error in case of cancer and normal, right? So I am just putting it infinity, right? Let's say I'm putting it infinity cost. So where my decision boundary will shift? Can anybody have a guess? So I'm putting it as an infinity, right? If this is my cost matrix or penalty matrix, what do you think? And let's say this is the probability, this is a probability of a normal, and this is a probability of a cancer, right? What do you think, where should my decision boundary will shift?
Sir,
Towards the
every
cancer
normal,
side?
yes, because every normal will be classified as cancer.
So whether it will be, so I am just putting this is my one decision boundary and this is my second decision boundary. So it will be 1, 1 or 2.
One.
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 So the intuition is here is that what I'm trying to convey, it doesn't matter like 1 or 2, but here I'm trying to convey the decision boundary will shift towards the region where it will accept no errors at all. So here you say for one class, right? For one class, right? So then every normal can be classified as a cancerous, but cancerous cannot be classified as a normal. So this region here will be for cancer. Even we have a very less probability for a cancer, very less, negligible. Then also we are classifying it as a cancer. Though the normal probability is very high, but we are ignoring this normal probability because the penalty for this negligible probability is infinite and we want to optimize the decision boundary. So just to overcome the infinite penalty, I don't want to accept any chance of getting infinite loss. So just to overcome, I will be shifting my decision boundary. Till then, I will get a 0 probability of a cancer, right? So in short, so this is just, I'm trying to explain you intuitively. In short, you can say out of all classes, so there it is just a binary case. Let's say there is there are 3 classes, right? So this is some third distribution for class. You want to classify for any x, right? So you are standing here. So you want to classify which this x belongs to which class. So what you do, you just compute this expression or a penalty for a class, and for whichever it is minimum. So you will classify that this x to that particular class. So you see it, you will understand it. It is very easy to and intuitive, right? So in general, this is the formula for particular. If you want to classify x to a particular class J, then this expression for all other classes except J should be minimum, right? And if you just remove this loss with 1, you replace loss with 1, then in simple, this rule says that you have to classify your x to the class which is having a maximum probability, what we have discussed yesterday, right? It simplifies to the same thing what we have discussed yesterday. But because we are putting a loss matrix here, so we have some different constraints now, and my decision boundary will move accordingly. Okay, so you see it is easy. You just refer to the book also. Okay, so another case is the rejection option. Let's say you want to do some classification, and for some x, like if you are here, either you get some very high probability for one class, or you get very low probability for other class. For example, for this red class, the probability is 0 here in this region. And for C1, the probability is 1, and for C2, the probability is 0 for this particular x. Similarly, for this particular x, the probability for C2 is 1, and for C1 is 0. So it is easy because I am having very high confidence that this x belongs to C2. So I say that all the x belongs to this region belongs to C2 class, and all the x belongs to this region belongs to C1 class with very high probability, or almost certain we are. But there may be a case for this x, right? I am having a probability, or this x, let's say this x, I am having a almost equal probability for both classes, C1 and C2. So it is not always good idea to classify this x to some random class, because it is kind of a randomness here, because both classes, this x have a equal probability of belongingness. So either you classify it as C1s, and then there will be a higher chances of error for C2. So it may be wise to not to classify at this situation and let it leave to the human decision, right? So human will introspect these kind of cases, and they will see that manually with the team of expert, and then they can decide. So it is always not good to take a decision for every x in a classifier. Sometimes if you are not sure for any class, then you just leave it for the human intervention, right? So this is known as a rejection option. So if you want to train a neural network, rather than taking it 3 classes, C1, C2, you take 3 classes. So C1, C2, and C3. And what C3 class says that it is rejected, right? It is a rejection option, right? So it is not always mandatory to classify either it is good or bad. So if the features are so that you cannot decide on it, you just say that it is rejected. And all the samples which are labeled as rejected, then humans will take them and introspect them manually, and then they will decide on it with a team of experts. Okay, so far so good. Like we have discussed so many things here, and I have given you a flavor of maximum likelihood, right, in terms of linear regression. I want to introduce you one more and most important concept that is known as maximum a posterior estimation. I feel that this is a backbone of the book and machine learning, probabilistic machine learning, that what I feel. And just to introduce this concept, I will start with a very simple example. Just you have a very intuitive feeling of this maximum a posteriori estimation. And then I will contrast it with maximum likelihood estimation, which we have already understood it. So we have two advantage of discussing this thing now, because we have discussed MLE. We will have a different example for MLE, and it will magnify our understanding. The second concept is map, which will contrast the concept in respect of MLE, and then help us to understand better both these concepts, right? So from here onwards, you may be finding some MLE revision, and with a new concept introduction that is known as maximum a posteriori estimation. Please feel free to stop me. This is a very important concept for this semester, right? For this course of machine learning. Okay. So I told you that the idea of machine learning is like to find out a true function, right? That true function can be like this. You give me an image, I will tell you that whether this image is having a dog or a cat. So it is a classification problem. So it is like have a discrete function. So for a given image, I will label it as a dog or a cat. So Y is a set which is having two labels, dog and a cat, right? So this is kind of a classification problem. Or you can see given X as an qualification, you have to tell what is the salary of a person. So Y is a continuous number from 0 to, let's say, 100,000, right? So let's say my range is of salary is 100,000. So now this is a regression problem, and I want to find out a function which will take some X and map it to some Y, which is a continuous in the range of 0 to 100,000, right? This is known as, and the whole idea in machine learning is to learn this function F, right? What probabilistic machine learning says that there is always some noise added to it, and you just bring all those discussions in your head now, which we have discussed for those later recent example what we have taken. So in real world, it is not always that we get a very clear data. There is always some random noise added to it, and it is not okay to say with very high probability or certainty that this image belongs to a dog, right? It may be a case that dog look like a cat, and in that case human himself is confused, and your algorithm is with very says only dog and cat, right? It doesn't say that with what probability it is. So to bring that more realistic thing into a picture, rather than coming to this deterministic functions, we come to this probabilistic modeling, right? So it is a probabilistic function or probabilistic view of a function. So given an image of a dog, you say that it is with zero point 0.8 probability it is a dog, but with zero point 0.2 probability it is a cat. So there is always a fuzziness involved in it. And it is more realistic approach, because even some images, if I give to you, these images are so confusing that you yourself as a human cannot tell whether it's a dog or a cat. So how can you trust, and how can you be sure that your algorithm always give you that more deterministic answer or certain answer? So to model this real-time situation, we bring all these probabilistic view of a function into a picture. And to estimate the probabilities, we have two approaches, right? So to estimate the probability for a given sample or image sample, we want to find out the true probability. We have the two methods here to estimate this probability. So first method is known as maximum likelihood, and the second method says maximum a posteriori estimation. So just to recap in quick one sentence, I am saying that I am modeling my function in a probabilistic sense. And just to estimate the probability, there are two methods. One is MLE and other is MAP, right? So just to discuss it with a common example, this is the example here. I'm going to flip a coin. So just to model it in a mathematical sense, if it comes heads, I say that my random variable X will be 1, right? So I have a outcome of a toss. That outcome will be represented by X. X can take either head or a tail. Because it is a mathematics, I am giving some number to it. So if 1 says that my outcome was head, and 0 says that it was a tail, right? So it is a random variable X. So if you say X1, it means I am taking my first toss. And if X1 is 1, I am saying it is a head. If X2 is 0, I am saying my second toss is a tail, right? This is a construct of a modeling, right? I am not aware what is my true theta, like whether it was an unbiased coin, then 50-50% I'm getting a head and tail, or it was a biased coin, then with some 90% probability I'm get a head and 10% probability I'm going to get a tail, right? So I don't know what is my true theta, but I want to estimate that. I want to guess what could be my true theta. And just to guess my true theta, I am taking two approaches. One is maximum likelihood and other is maximum posterior, right? So the total number of tosses are n, where alpha 1 are the times when I get a head, and alpha 0 are the times when I get a tail, right? So number of heads plus number of tails are the total number of trials, right? This is n. So I hope that this is very easy to understand. If you have any questions so far, please let me know. Quickly, yes, no, yes, no. Okay, okay. So now this is okay. So I have first algorithm. What I do just to estimate. So my true theta was theta, and estimated theta is like there is some double dots on that, just to distinguish it from the true theta. The first algorithm says if you want to find out the probability of a head, what you do, the number of trials, you divide the number of heads by number of trials. So number of trials are n, which is sum of head and tail, right? So this is your first algorithm. And the second algorithm, right? Just be precise on this. The second algorithm says that you add some imaginary number of heads. So you have heads right here, alpha 1. You had alpha 0, some tails, number of time tails. You add some imaginary heads. You think in your head like it could be some, there are 20 heads, right? Before then that, right? So you add some imaginary heads, alpha gamma 1, to the real heads what you got now, and you add some imaginary tails, gamma 0, to the tails which you got now as the outcome of the tosses, right? So these two numbers, gamma 1 and gamma 0, is some imaginary numbers. I will tell you and discuss you how you understand these imaginary numbers. But for now, you just say, imagine that these are some imaginary numbers which you are adding to the true numbers. So true number is alpha 1 is like true number of heads. Gamma 1 is imaginary number of heads. Gamma 0 is true imaginary number of tails. Alpha 0 is true number of tails, right? Now, if somebody asks you, what do you think? What is the probability of a head? You just take what you do. Total number of trials are alpha 1, gamma 1 plus alpha 0, gamma 0. Divide by the number of times you get a head. So head means imaginary head plus the real heads what you just got from the outcome, right? Clear so far? The algorithm?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Very nice, very nice. So this is like a, and now we will this is algorithm 2, is just bringing some imaginary numbers or your belief. I would say it's a belief that you are bringing in algorithm 2. So let's first discuss what is the advantage of second algorithm over first algorithm. So if let's say you know that there is a problem of overfitting likelihood, we have discussed it, and it is easy to discuss now because I have already proved it, right? And just to bring an intuition, if you toss one time, then first algorithm says that you have 100% probability of seeing a head, right? And it is really not a realistic measure, because you know that just because you have done one time toss, and that one time toss, first algorithm says you have 100% probability of seeing head. And so this is not realistic, first algorithm. So what you can do, because you have grown so far and that your age is 20 to 25 years, and you feel that on your experience in your life that mostly coins you have seen are unbiased. So one of you may think that I feel that it is a unbiased coin, and I will add some, I want to add my belief to this experiment. So because your belief is something that you think in your head, and to bring that intuition or belief to the experiment, you want to convert into a numbers, right? So the belief is something in your head, right? It doesn't have, you can't touch it. It is something, a quantity which you can't express it. To express that belief, what you do, you just invent some imaginary numbers in your head. You say that because it is an unbiased coin, and I am very much sure it is an unbiased coin, then 50% of the time it will be head and 50% of the time it will be tail. It depends upon your belief, how strongly you think that 50% could be 10 10. So it means out of 20 trials, 10 times you got a head and 10 times you get a tail. If you are very, very infinitely strong, then you say out of 1 million times, 500,000 times I got a head and 500,000 times I got a tail. So there are two beliefs, certainty of degree of belief. First is you saying 10 times I get head and 10 times I got a tail. It's a 50% probability. The other time you say 50 million times head, 50 million times tails, it's still a 50% probability of getting a head. But these two cases are different in terms of a degree of certainty. When you say 50 million times I got head and 50 million times you got tail, it means you have no way to think other than this. But the moment you say 10 times head, 10 times tails, you feel that, yeah, I feel still it is unbiased, but not infinitely, not with infinite degree of certainty, right? So this is like, this is bringing your belief to us, to the experiment. You're expressing it in terms of the numbers, right? So if you say that the coin is not it is a biased coin, then you may say that I feel that it is a 70% time it will give head. So you just say gamma 1 equals to 7 and gamma 0 equals to 3, right? So there you say that it is a 30% time it gives a tail. So now still it is a 70%, right? 7 by 7 plus 3, right? 7 plus 3. It is a 30% times you feel that it is a heads. So this is your belief. So if you bring gamma 1 and gamma 2 like this, 7 and 3, so you are bringing your belief that the coin is biased and that belief is 70% it will be head. But if you're very strongly believe that 70% it will head, so then you just increase the number from 7 to 700 and 3 to 300. Still this ratio is same. It is 700 by 700 plus 300, which is 1000. So 700 plus 300, still it is 0.7, but the belief of degree is very, very strong now, right? It is very easy to think of. So both of you and your friend both thinks that tomorrow will be a rain, right? But one thinks that definitely there will be a rain. Other things, I think that there will be a rain, but I feel you have a less confidence than your friend. Then just to express that situation, you can take this example what I'm discussing. Second algorithm is just a special case of a first algorithm where you just don't want to add any belief to you, right? Any belief to the experiment. In that case, you say gamma 1 and gamma 0 to 0, 0, right? The good part of second algorithm is if you observe infinite number of trials, your belief will not affect the true estimation. I will repeat this sentence. The good part of second experiment is you may be thinking right now that if you get a wrong belief, that will change the situation. But if, if you have an infinite number of experiments, it means you keep on doing the things forever. Your wrong belief will not change your true estimation, right? Any question? I have still to prove like why your belief will not change the true estimation. I have still to prove that. But still, if you have any question in your head, you just ask me. Okay. Fine. Okay then. Okay, then next, I will try to first derive what is expression, and then we will see some trial of experiment which we can reproduce it. So both experiments exemplify the two most widely approaches, MLE and MAP, right? So in MAP, the only thing that we have is we can bring our background knowledge or our belief of the experiment. We can bring that thing into a picture, right? So that it is more open to your thought. The second experiment, in very informal sense, I'm just putting it. Okay. Okay. Let's. There's a set of experiment. Actually, I have taken these slides from Tom Michel. and he teaches in Carnegie Mellon University. So there is a very good article written by him. So these all things are taken from there. So in his experiment, he shows that. So I am just first taking a correct belief. So there is the true estimation of a head was 30%, right? So the true probability for head was 30%, right? So now if you take a wrong belief, it's correct belief. So this is, you have taken gamma 0 as 42 and gamma 1 as 18. So your imaginary probability will be 18 plus 18 plus 42, right? 18 plus 42. So it means somewhere in your head you thought that the heads are 18 imaginary and tails are 42. So this imaginary probability says that it is a 0.3 probability of getting head. So it is a right belief. So you somehow accidentally thought in your head this imaginary numbers, and these imaginary numbers are coinciding to the true estimation, because the coin you have used to toss was actually 30%. So this straight line shows you the true belief, right? You started with, so this blue is a maximum likelihood estimation. So first you got a tail. You said that I am getting a with higher probability a tail always. Then you go for second toss. Then you say that I get a 50% head and tail, and likewise you are just fluctuating. So this blue one is a fluctuating one of maximum likelihood estimation, right? And this red one, you see this red one is more closely kissing the true estimation. And once you are increasing the number of trials for more than 200, then you say that both estimation, whether it is a map where you have used imaginary numbers or whether you have MLE, both converge to the true estimation with very small degree of error, right? But here, if you see here in this range, your map and MLE are far. If you take a right degree of belief, in very short number of experiments, your map will converge fast towards the true belief. But your MLE is away from the true belief, a true value of theta, right? But over when you do it with more number of times, you see that both are converging to the same value. In strong belief, so this is also 30%. Here, if you say 36 divided by 36 plus 84, so it also comes to a 30%. But it is a more stronger belief than the sorry, 84, right? So it is more stronger belief than this above previous one, right? Where the numbers are 18 and 42. Then you see that maximum likelihood is same, and this stronger belief is more kissing to this true estimation. Because if you get some wrong estimation during your tosses, but your imaginary belief is so heavy that is stick to the true belief, right? Now the second option which you may have in your head, the true belief that imaginary, that your prior information is not correct, right? So the true estimation was, the true number was 30%. You have taken a wrong imaginary numbers 24 and 36, which give you a 40% probability of head, right? It gives you a 40% probability of head, and you started with this wrong belief, right? So this wrong belief, what it says, that maximum a posterior estimation, which shows in red, it will, in starting, it will give you the wrong estimation, right? And maximum likelihood estimation, as always, because it is over, it is a case of overfitting. So you can't trust too much for the less number of trials. But when you go beyond 100 trials, then they start converging towards the true estimation. And for some value, they will have like almost come to each other with a certain degree of error, right? This is a wrong belief with less degree of certainty. This is a wrong belief with higher degree of certainty, right? You have taken the same 40% ratio, but with a higher belief. It is 48 and 72. Now it will take a lot of time to converge. It will take a lot of time to converge because it sticks to the 40% range, right? because you have a very strong belief that it was a 40% time, 40% probability of toss of a coin of getting head, because you had a very strong belief that was wrong, and you're doing an experiment. After some certain of experiment, your data will going to like overnumber the imaginary numbers, right? And this like outweighted this your imaginary belief, because you keep on tossing, and after 200 tosses you found out that what the belief you had is not exactly at, it is not at all near to the true belief, right? Or near to the estimation, true estimation, because it is diverging from that. So it is 40.4, and this my this new belief is diverging, and it is going away from the 40% times, right? And somewhere it will converge to the number, right? After like 500 trials, both belief will converge to the same number. You can reproduce this experiment in your MATLAB or Python or R, right? So you will going to get the same thing. So any questions on this? Fine. If you have no questions, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now the things is like how to like just derive the uh, formulation of this maximum likelihood and map estimation. So for maximum likely MLE, we have done it for linear regression. Just for you, I will redo it again in for this experiment. So we are going to find out the probability. We are going to find out the likelihood function first, and then we will maximize it. Anybody can quickly tell me what is our likelihood function for it, because we have just drawn it in our labs also. What is the likelihood function for this? What is a variable for this likelihood function? You can answer me and I will bring to the point. What is a variable for this likelihood function? You just bring all those in knowledge which you had before.
Theta.
Theta, very good.
Theta.
So theta, exactly. So here, there you had a like a function. We wanted to find out intercept and slope. So there were two parameters. Here I want to find out like what is the probability of getting head from a coin. So there is only one parameter here, that is theta. So in likelihood function, the only variable is theta, right? Now, just to construct a likelihood function, I know for my first trial, the probability of getting head is theta itself, right? So if you this is your data set, you tossed your coin 11010, and somebody asks you, what do you think? What is the probability of getting this data? So you say that if the probability of getting 1 is theta, so it means this 1 comes because of this probability. This 1 comes because of this probability theta again, because you are getting two successive ones. So because theta is playing a role here to bring the 1. Now you are getting 0. So it means 1 minus theta is the probability who is playing a role, right? Then it is 1 again. So it is theta. And 0 again, it is 1 minus theta. So these are the probabilities. And again, you remember what we had done. It is an IID assumption. You multiply all these probability, you will get this expression, right? So this expression says that you plug your theta into this, you get a total likelihood probability of a data, seeing a data. So if you plug a probability of a theta into this expression, you will get to know what is the probability of us seeing a data with this theta. Just to make you concrete, if my probability of theta of seeing a head is 1, so I will ask a question, please listen it carefully. If I say that the probability of seeing head is 1, right? What do you think? What is the probability of seeing this data 11010? So if I say that the probability of seeing head is 1, it means the probability of theta is 1. What is the probability of seeing this data set 11010?
So 0.
Very good, very nice. No chance, exactly. Very nice. So now you get an intuition of it. So it means if you want to plot it, if you plot it on the scale of theta and you are just changing your theta one by one. So I say the probability of getting theta is 1. So let's say this is 1 here on the scale of 0 to 1. This is 0. This is 1. So this is likelihood. So it means likelihood means the probability of seeing data given theta, right? The probability of seeing data given theta. So if I say my theta is 1, the probability of likelihood is 0, right? You just said. So it is 0. What is if the probability of seeing tail is 1? What is the what is the probability of data set then? The probability of seeing tail is 1. What is the probability of a data set? Very nice. Very good.
0.
Very good. So it is 0 again, right? And then you keep on varying. So if you just vary from 0 to 1 somewhere, so if it is 50-50 or 30-40, so it is somewhere like peaky at this way, and it will again dip to it. So it is again for different values of theta, and you're plotting and calculating it, and then plot and you will get the same figure which I have shown you yesterday in the lab experiment. Okay. So this is likelihood thing which we have reproduced it. This is not new to for it, but it is really intuitive in the sense to see the same thing with two different example. And I hope it really helps you out to make it to construct your intuition and imagination about your concepts. Okay. So I left with no time for today. So I will continue tomorrow for map, but tomorrow class is very, very important. Don't miss it because it will really lay a foundation for your next coming years, right? Okay. Thank you. Is there any question before winding up the class? Sujit is quick, right, in giving attendance. Very good. Okay then. So you can drop